Good
Good morning, everyone.
Can anybody people online, can you hear me okay? Put your thumbs up or?
It's Michelle, and I can hear you.
Good, thank you. Welcome everybody to the Committee of the Whole meeting for today. And I would like to start by recognising that the CVRD we are on the unceded territories of the Kwotson, Malahat, Subasit, Halalt, Penelakut, Staminas, Liaxin, Pequachin, Ditidat, and Pachidat nations, whose people have walked gently here for thousands of years. And I would also like, we got an echo. 1, 2, 3, is it gone? Okay, thank you. I would like to start off again by welcoming Acting Director, I'm sorry, Lorna, yes. And I understand from you that Director McGonigal is continuing his recovery well as well. Good. Mayor McGonigal, yes, of course. Sorry. Who else have we got? Mr. Tallyho, you're here as acting, or are you acting as well? Okay. And do we have anybody else? Anybody else who's here? And Marsh Stevens online. There you are, sir, waving at me. Welcome. Okay, having done all that, Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
Moved, seconded, and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favour? Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. We have the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting of September 25th be adopted.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Errors or omissions? None? All those in favour? And next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't see anybody in the gallery at this time, so we will expedite up to one of the reports, a verbal report from the Asset Management Division regarding asset management maturity assessment and roadmap.
Lovely, thank you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to just present my progress for the asset management maturity assessment. So today's discussion, we're going to go through the project overview itself. So basically we'll tell the story about the project, about current asset management maturity levels, our desired maturity levels over the next 3 to 5 years, the assessment outcomes, then the asset management strategy and next steps, and then some time for questions. So, purpose of the project. So phase 1 is to determine the current level of asset management maturity against the Institute of Asset Management 6-box model. Identify the desired state of asset management maturity level for the 39 subject areas that are in that 6-box model. Identify and prioritise the improvement tasks that will achieve that desired state over the next 3 to 5 years. And then the project phase 2 is to develop an asset management strategy that describes all of that and sets the timeframes. So, this is the asset management 6-box model. So number 1 is the strategy and planning section. This is about asset management policy, asset management strategy, asset management planning, and sustainable service delivery plans. Then we have asset management decision making. This kind of covers our decision making processes for life cycle management and where else are we? Yeah, capital planning and resourcing. Then,
sorry, we're just going to put it in presenter mode so that they see this more clearly and only you see that.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Side would be a good one, yeah.
Okay, there you go.
There we go.
Is that better? Sorry.
But then he needs to see his notes. So.
Yeah.
Sorry about the delay, folks. We'll
Yeah,
be
sorry.
there in a minute, I'm sure, Mr. Forrest.
Yeah.
Presenter view?
It's in presenters, but it's not using the same thing.
Oh, okay, well, sorry, it's not working, so maybe we should just continue on the way we were.
Okay, sorry.
Apologies, folks.
So yeah, the part 3 is our life cycle delivery. So this is our operations and maintenance, acquisition and disposal of assets. Asset information is part 4. So this is basically about not just our asset information, but how we actually manage it and data standards and data governance. 5 is organisation and people. So this is about like our culture as an organisation and how we actually want to implement asset management, along with actually resource planning and succession planning. And then the final box is 6, which is risk and review. So that is about how we actually incorporate risk into our decision-making processes, and also about like management review and review of the actual asset management system itself. So this slide basically goes into all of the 39 asset management practice areas. So all colour-coded, like to align with the 6-box model in the previous slide. So the actual process itself, we take all of those 39 subject areas, and each department ranks themselves against where they are in levels of maturity. So 0 being not started, 1 being aware and they've maybe done some work towards actually implementing some of these asset management practices. Developing is they've been aware, they've actually done a lot more work compared to the awareness, so they're probably looking at about like 50% stage. And then 3, they're actually like fully competent and they actually do this as part of their business process. Then we decided that we'd actually do a bit of a weighting to give us like a whole corporate view. And we did that by asset value. So facilities management's 25%, utilities is 35%, etc. And this is our current level of maturity, which is our weighted average. So this looks a bit like an angry unicorn. So as you can see, our highest score in our asset management policy, because we already have one, and it's not scoring a 3 because it hasn't been like fully communicated to all departments. We also have a pretty good level of like organisational culture and structure, and fault and incident response. So we score pretty well over quite a lot of the 39 subject areas. And then we thought we'd try and do like a corporate 3-year goal. So this is the kind of things that we want to achieve within the 3 years at a corporate level. We'd like everyone to be, all of our departments to be at a 2, so like at least developing in the next 3 years in all areas. And then have a few where we're actually fully competent. So we have like our asset management policy, asset management strategy and objectives, strategic planning. So we're actually starting to do sustainable service delivery plans for each department. Some capital investment decision making. So develop processes so that it's all consistent. Down the bottom, we think that shutdown and outage and fault and incident response and asset decommissioning and disposal are very important too. So we really want to sort of like understand better how we actually manage those, and then also asset costing and valuation. So we actually understand how much money we need to put in the bucket for future replacements. So without understanding our asset value, we can't do that. Right, asset management maturity levels versus corporate goals. So each department self-assessed. Facilities management. On the whole, I think facilities management, they manage a lot of the 39 subject areas really well. They're very competent they show competency in a lot of areas. There are obviously areas that need improvement, the same as everybody else. So they're competent in 21 of the 39. So there are things that my team need to help them with, like the policies, the strategy, some of the strategic asset management planning and the asset management planning itself. but a lot of the other things they'll be working on themselves. Go to the fire service. Now, this was actually filled out by Clayton and with help from the fire chiefs. As they're a volunteer-driven organisation, it's not surprising that they're managing things on more of an ad hoc basis rather than actually having anything planned. Again, for me, I'm going to be providing support, especially in the policy areas and the asset management planning. Parks and trails, they're developing. They've got competent in 1 of the 39 and developing in 22 of the 39. There's 16 subject areas that they need assistance on. Recycling and solid waste, a little bit better than parks, but in the same kind of like ballpark. And utilities. Now, I won't sort of like go into detail with these next slides. I think this is basically about where they are currently and where they want to be. But each of the departments have a very similar theme. They all want to sort of like improve on the asset management strategy, demand, strategic planning, asset management planning, and capital investment decision making processes. I think that will give us a really good start on being able to actually like provide evidence-based and risk-based decision making for asset renewals. It'll also help us with the delivery of our sustainable service delivery plans, and also the development of our long-term financial plans and reserve funds. So, phase 2, asset management strategy. So the strategy basically provides the what and how we propose to manage our assets. It's a key element in the asset management system. It provides direction on how to implement our asset management objectives, which are part of the asset management policy. Now, identified out of the assessment, we have all these improvement actions and some timelines for the 3 years. So, asset management policy. Director Morrison? Okay. So update the asset management policy and obtain board approval. Asset management strategy and objectives. Basically, we'll have a partial strategy to come out of this current project. And then for me, it's basically monitor progress and repeat this maturity assessment each year. I'd update the asset management strategy and expand the content to give us a comprehensive document. Strategic planning, again, and asset management planning is basically to develop our sustainable service delivery plans for each department. Capital investment decision making, so that's actually me developing a process to test it, finalise it, and then implement it into the process to make it useful to identify and prioritise projects going forward. And then a lot of these other parts are divisional and department level improvements, so shutdown and outage strategies. How do we actually plan for shutdowns and outages and not having a massive effect on service delivery? Maintenance delivery, that's basically doing all work in citywide asset management system to put all of our operations, maintenance and renewal tasks in. And again, the shutdown and outage management, we have the actual strategy itself, then we actually need to start implementing that. Same with fault and incident response, use of our works order system to record fault and incident events. That's all in citywide. Data information, that's basically just improving our data within citywide, so that it'll help us with investment decisions. Asset performance monitoring, basically implementing our standard operating procedures for measurement and reporting of asset service and performance indicators. And asset costing and valuation, so that's basically where we need to be looking at unit rates for all of our assets and our lifespan values so that we can better predict renewals and also replacement forecast costs. So improvement actions in more detail. So asset management policy. I've revised the asset management policy to better align with the newly developed corporate strategic plan. It's going to include fleet, IT, stormwater management and natural assets into the scope. The asset management strategy, this is basically to develop the strategy ongoing out of this project, which will describe other improvement actions in the maturity assessment. Capital investment decision making, complete asset costing evaluation, develop processes to support consistent and repeatable evidence-based decisions. Maintenance management. A lot of work's already been done, and we've uploaded a lot of this in Citywide already, but there's some things that need further improved. We also need to think about like early, mid, late life interventions currently used to manage their assets. Data governance standards. Need to develop a framework that describes how our asset data is managed, who's responsible for it, how it's formatted, stored and disposed of. Risk and criticality. We need to develop a asset criticality matrix and upload that into Citywide. So that's basically about how critical the asset is to service delivery. And then develop a framework which will describe the processes used to rate service level risks, which is all about funding, resources, climate change, demand, increase or reduction in population, etc. Sustainable service delivery plans. These are really, really key documents. We need to be really having the data available to support the development of these. So that's describing the assets, so the type, quantity, age, value and condition of our assets, the level of service being provided, the risks and criticality and effects on service delivery, long-term renewal forecast and long-term financial plan. They're the key components of our sustainable service delivery plans. Performance monitoring. This is basically developing a framework that describes the processes used to monitor the performance of our asset management programme and who's responsible for each stage of the process. And then, so basically just doing this asset management benchmarking assessment on an annual basis and reporting back to the board on how we're doing. So summary of next steps. I think from my previous presentation to the board, we were sort of in the phase one. We're probably actually a step above where we are at the moment. The policy has been reviewed and it's been refreshed, but hopefully it will be adopted today. The asset management benchmarking assessment is nearly complete. The strategy will be our next deliverable. I've also done some work on one of the framework documents, so the condition assessment documents I've already done, so they're in draft form, waiting for feedback from the departments. So I think we're in a pretty good space there. So our short timeline is get the policy and the strategy developed, really dig down into asset costing and evaluation, develop maintenance schedules and standard operating procedures, and keep improving our asset data. And then we have a lot of those will go over the 3 years because it's continual improvement. And then we can start doing things like shutdown and outage strategy and management, sustainable service delivery plans probably in next year because we need to sort of like really get our data in shape before we can start doing them. Better capital investment decision making. And that will go on into 2026. So, key takeaways are Citywide software is now operational. It's working and a lot of our departments are using it, which is good. The completion of the asset management benchmarking assessment will provide us with our next steps, so we can have a really good asset data set which will support evidence-based decision making. It'll also help us understand our infrastructure deficit and what financial resources we need to put aside to sustainably fund it in the future. And then working forward to improve asset information and financial data will totally help us understand our level of service on its true cost. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Forrest. Could you take the presentation down so I can see everybody on the screen here, please? I've got 2 speakers on my list so far.
Yeah, thank you. There we go.
3 now. Director Morrison, would you like to go first? Thank you for that, Mr. Morrison.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. It's interesting because my first exposure to this was before it was a thing at UBCM, and we learned about asset management. I'm sure it existed beforehand, but at the elected levels, we just hadn't had any exposure to this. And I know staff have been doing this sort of off the corner of their desk for decades. But the challenge that I'm facing, well, first of all, I want to say, great report, and this is one of these things that I know it's very operational in nature. So as a board, we don't have to actually know all the nuts and bolts about it being done, but just have the confidence that we know that it is being done well.
Yeah.
And so I have that high level of confidence from the nature of the report. But I have a challenge, and I've been bringing this every year coming back from UBCM, and it goes to the very last slide and the last 4 words where it said, "and its true cost," right? And so, you know, this has been, in my view, almost a sneaky download by senior governments, where they've said, unless you're doing asset management, you're not getting grants, you're not getting project funding, you have to do this.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that in some of the very earliest iterations, there were programs that showed an organization, a municipality or regional district's budget, and then they had a separated out asset management percentage or number. And we know about asset management, and maybe a few folks that follow the regional district know about asset management, but I can tell you the public has no idea about asset management and the fiscal impact that it will have on our budgets.
Yeah.
So my question is, because this is new to our taxpayers, do we have any plans for community education, any publication that we plan to do around having our public and the people that pay the bills know why this is so important? And I equate this to regional recreation or our housing function, where we had to go and get elector consent for that, but we don't have to for this. And it could be even more impactful than maybe even those two things combined. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about bringing the community along to understand that part of their tax bill is going to be for a new way of doing business in local government?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, yeah, if we look at do it from our water and wastewater utilities, for instance, each system has its own little website. We can, and I know there's the testing results go on that. We can actually start putting some infographics in about levels, how we're achieving our service levels, and about the actual capacity of the system. That will help. So at least I think the general public will be reassured that we do have a handle on our service and how we actually maintain our assets to provide that. We could be more transparent about how much money it costs for us to actually do our flushing programs and all of the operational activities which we complete to actually provide our service, and then look at our long-term renewal forecasts and actually put those on the website. So there's lots of ways we can actually inform the public on that, I think.
Yeah, okay. Follow up?
Just a quick follow-up. I think that's important, down to the sort of granular level as per service water system and the likes.
Yeah.
I get that. But we also have that responsibility, especially in the next few months that are coming up,
Yeah.
where we're doing budget.
Yeah.
And there's a good chunk of what we have to tax for
Yeah.
is going to be specifically for asset management. And there's no global number that we can attribute to this new initiative that we're doing? I know it's not new, but to our public, it's new.
Yeah.
I see Barb sneaking up behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, yeah.
Little bit of
Thank you.
help stepping up there.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, through to Director Morrison, I think it's an excellent point. Like, I think there's been a lot of realization that we have work to do on civic education. We have a role to play, and there's a lot of different ways we can do it, and Neil's highlighted some on the very specific utility end of it. So one of the changes that we made this year to our budget process was to kind of separate out. Previously, we would have supplemental requests, which made it sound like things that we were adding to a budget, as opposed to what most of them really are, which is capital investment in assets. And so one of the main structural changes we made about how we're managing budget this year is that we've separated out capital investment as a separate reporting part of the budget, so that it's a bit more transparent, that when we're either taking from reserve or requisitioning in order to replace an asset, that's been categorized as such. So, but I think there's definitely more we can do. So really glad for the question and how it will inform our discussions going forward.
Thank you, Director Morrison. And next on my list is Director Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the report, and congratulations on being able to get your head around such a complex subject. It's one of the things that's really intrigued me is the growing, what appears to me to be a growing complexity or growing scope of asset management over the years. And I think what Director Morrison was saying, I think I'm on the same page as him with this, the sort of simple messaging. When we first got numbers at North Cowichan, there was a simple message, and it was, hey, we own assets of $1.6 billion in replacement value. We should be spending $30 million a year or saving $30 million a year. Yep. We're up now saving $7 million a year, so we've got a big gap to bridge. So to get that sort of a simple thing that you can sort of say, hey, you know, here's the asset management problem we're facing, is I think is a really important thing.
Yeah.
Within that sort of complexity. And I think the other thing I wanted to say is the complexity at the CVRD is much higher even than at the municipal level. And I think the policy scope describes some of the complexity of CVRD assets. And as I understand it, you know, asset systems can have components with different budgets and different management structures and even different ownership. And the ownership thing is what I wanted to ask a question about, because policy 15 says that infrastructure with clear definitions of ownership and operational requirements will be prioritized. And I wonder if you could explain the implications of this, and especially does this effectively mean that natural assets will not be prioritized? And since I'm on a roll, could you describe in general the complexities of ownership at the CVRD, and in particular like regional assets versus sub-regional assets versus assets that are peculiar to electoral areas?
Yeah. Yeah, regional districts are very complex. I think with regard to ownership, I don't really know how to answer this, actually, if I'm honest. Yeah, regional services are paid for by everybody in the region. So, yeah, I'm not really sure how actually that works.
That's a toughie for you, Mr.
Yeah, it's a
Mr.
real
Forrest,
conundrum,
so-
actually. I'm not really sure how to answer that, if I'm honest.
I'm not sure I can do a better job than Neil, but it is a complicated question. But I do know one of the things that Neil has talked to me about is questions of ownership around, like for instance, the fire department. So we saw today on the chart that it's a volunteer-run, basically, organization. And so our ability to impact asset management there has been limited in the past, or it hasn't been fully developed in the past. But we actually own like fire halls. And so there's this a little bit of a disconnect sometimes between who's operating and running the hall versus who owns the hall and who has responsibility for different parts of maintaining the halls as assets over time. So I think you're right, it's complex. That's just one example. I don't know that we're in a position to answer that question today beyond that, but that the way our finances are structured are that takes that into consideration, right? Who's paying for what services and which assets. And so one of the things that will result from that is that we have to, once we understand the long-term financial implications, we have to go about a series of setting up reserves, many reserves that we don't have, because we technically should have a reserve for each service that has assets that need replacing, right? So there's a structural piece there for sure that relates to distinguishing ownership questions and also service contribution questions, and then making sure the financial structures mirror that. So, but I don't know if it really answers your question, so.
Do you have a follow-up? Try and
If you
make
don't
it
mind,
simple.
No, sorry, I shouldn't have added that last bit on. It was just sort of my curiosity, but really if we could get back to the meaning of policy statement 15, that things that have clear ownership will be prioritized, and how does that reflect on natural assets would be.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one thing to add to answer
Okay.
that.
Yeah, please.
So we know that integration of natural assets into the asset management program is something that we have incorporated that at the board's direction. But it also reflects, reiterating Barbara's comments, is that we do have to take stock of all the assets we currently own and fully integrate them into the system and make sure that we're doing asset management to the best of our ability for the things that we own. Not to say that natural assets won't be able to be prioritized in the program. But one thing I did want to point out too is that it really will depend on availability of funding. A lot of what we do on large projects is grant driven as well. And we have noticed that the federal infrastructure programs have over the more recent years, in the past, say 5 years, focused on things like flood mitigation and drainage and climate change related responses. And so it will also be influenced by the level of infrastructure dollars coming from senior levels of government, how we can actually implement our asset management program. But they have signaled that will be something that will continue to be important and that we can take advantage of. So I thought that was kind of, we'll see what's coming in the next round of funds and then be able to have that influence our implementation.
Thank you, Ms. Miles-Wilson and Ms. Mohan. You haven't got any more, have you?
I don't, but I don't know the answer to the question I asked.
Understood. Let's see, who's next on my list? Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Forrest. In alignment with complexity, I found this a very complex report to try to digest, but in keeping with Mr. Director Morrison's comments, it's not up to me to know the details. I'm more interested in knowing, does staff, are they at a competency level to understand asset management? For instance, is Mr. Postings just being harder nosed on the preparedness of the fire protection services than, say, facilities? As I look at the rankings, facilities seems to be one of the bright lights, as does utilities. Is there an opportunity for sort of human subjectivity to enter in, or does Citywide get away from that and make sure that over time our assets are going to follow the same sort of life cycle and we won't have shocks and surprises?
Oh, right, yeah, so, yeah, the asset management maturity assessment results, they are basically like, they're self-assessed. So, I think facilities, they do have a very good handle on what they do. It is part of their sort of like core business, whereas fire is typically not, just because of the nature of the organisation. So it's a hard one to sort of like compare the two. Also, with things like parks, their assets are different because it's not land-based rather than actual asset-based. Even though like the land is an asset, it's just managed completely differently. Within Citywide, we have our costing, our like useful lifespans, which we'll probably be refining over time, because so that they're actually like experiential based. So like some systems, like say like buried infrastructure, for instance, might last longer than others, depending on like soil conditions. So, I mean, we can put it like a blanket 90 years in for like PVC pipes, but in Honeymoon Bay, for instance, compared to like Saltaire, they might wear out differently just because of the ground conditions. It could be like acidic soils or whatever, or even just like the amount of use they get, you know. So that's why it's important to just keep up with things like condition assessments, flushing pipes and that kind of thing, so that you actually get a better handle on things over time.
Thank you, Neil. I'm going to, if you don't mind, I've got a growing list of speakers here. I'm going to limit follow-ups and come back if necessary. Director Martin.
That was quicker than I thought. Thanks very much for the report, and I have an observation, and maybe it's just semantics, and a question. So the observation is, we use the word "our assets."
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that we think broader than that it really is the public's assets.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if we communicate that well, because this really is about telling informing the public about what they have, what they own, and how CVRD will help maintain that. So we use the word "our" sometimes as CVRD.
Yes.
Yeah, rather than public, and that's just an observation. The question I have, and this comes from multiple conversations I've had with my fire chief around their facility, and how can he, as a fire chief, as a volunteer, even come to start to asset manage, and he feels the obligation to do something because North Oyster has a brand new fire hall.
Yep.
And so his frustration around it. So where in the policy or where in this whole process do you see facilities taking over that role of like how does this all sort of get granular, I guess?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think if we were to get facilities management to actually look after the fire halls on their behalf, we need to look at what the fire chiefs and the staff actually do as part of their maintenance program currently. I think North Oyster have actually maybe gone for an RFP to actually get a maintenance management contract rather than actually try and do it in-house. But yeah, I mean, our operational budgets are basically currently just funding ad hoc maintenance and replacements. We haven't actually got a formalised maintenance program because the chiefs just haven't got the time to do it. It'd be on the side of the desk. So it does make sense for it to actually fall under facilities management, but our facilities management team are probably super busy with everything else that they've got. So again, fire halls become managed off the side of their desks. So yeah, unless we actually get some real resources, either externally or internally, then it's just going to stay the same.
Thank you, Neil. Ms. Mohan.
So I'd just like to add that the next part of the work, the strategy, is to look at those competency areas, we've already identified where they need to grow, and then create a strategy for that. So that's the next step for us to embark upon. So. But I also wanted to go back to Director Abbott's question, if that's okay, just about staff competency. So Neil pointed out in his presentation that there's an organizational culture and skills capacity piece to improving our asset management program. And so we do have funds within the Community Works funds that have been set aside for staff capacity building, and we regularly make use of those funds to improve the level of training in different areas because it's not even across the organization. Some areas do have more skill and experience than others, but we do have some funds to assist with that already, and so we do make good use of those annually and send people on training where we see that they need some support. So,
Good, thank you. Who's next on my list? Director Nicholson. You good? I do have, anybody else before I go ahead here? There's only two things I'd like to bring up myself. That one of them is life cycle delivery, which is quite elastic. On some cases, we know that it's meant to be for 5 years, but you know as well as I do, I think, that things, if they're looked after properly,
Yes.
my truck, for instance, can go on for a lot longer.
Yeah.
So will there be any part of reliability forecasting in that? Does
Yes.
Citywide do that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. That's a great answer. Yes, it's
Yeah.
fine. And the last thing is, where was it here? Self-assessment. Good thing, but do you ever do spot audits?
I haven't yet because this is our first one.
Okay. Is it in the plans to do audits?
Absolutely, yes.
Good, good. All right, thank you very much, Neil. Anyone else that needs to talk? Director Abbott.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered why, as you start to add asset classes, why was it not obvious that IT and fleet would be assets that they're so evident to people that work for organizations, whereas the HEPA systems and the HVACs, they're not as evident.
Yeah. Yeah, go for that.
So originally, fleet management was identified as needed in the organization. It's been in our corporate strategic plan for like a decade. We just have not had the resources. And so with an asset management position established and an asset technician established, and we're looking at now being able to resource that and actually follow through, and so then we can add it to the policy. So it just wasn't scoped originally because we had no resources for it. That's on the fleet side. On the IT side, it has a little bit to do with the fact that until recently, investments in IT have not been at the level to be considered capital. They're considered equipment, and so they've been in operating budgets, and there hasn't been there's not always the financial vehicle to borrow for them as capital, et cetera, and set up reserve funds for them as capital. So that's changing, and we're realizing that we really need to do it as a discipline regardless of those rules, and so now we've added it to the policy. So.
Thank you, Ms. Mohan. And I think that's it, Mr. Forrest. Thank you very much for your presentation. You and I will have a chat afterwards, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Ms. Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. We actually have Mr. Forrest here for R2. That's a report from the Asset Management Division regarding asset management policy revision, and the recommendation is that it be recommended to the board approve of the newly revised asset management policy.
Interesting. So moved and seconded. Are you seconding or we? Okay. Ms. Segal, Director Ms. Segal.
Thank you. I love the YouTube video that you sent out for us to watch ahead of time. And the takeaway that I really got from that was how important collaboration is within the
Yes.
organization, but also from the top down, like from the policy. So reading the policy and the guiding principles, I don't really see the word collaboration in there, and I'm wondering if there's a place for that in this policy, or to emphasize it a bit more.
Okay. Yes. That's a good point. I can add it.
Okay, then. So any more discussion? Looking online, don't see anybody there. I think it's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion? None? Call the question. Oh, this is for, yeah. Yeah, if you would, please.
Yeah, that it be recommended the board approve the newly revised asset management policy. It's been moved and seconded.
All those in favour? Sorry?
Does that need to be like an amendment?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can amend that. Yeah.
So then I'd move to add collaboration
Okay,
where appropriate.
awesome. Thank you.
Okay, do I have a mover for that addition or that amendment? I don't need one? Nope.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. So on the amendment, please. Moved?
It was moved, it was seconded.
Okay, and seconded. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any opposed? No? Go ahead, Director Justice.
Yeah, I'm sorry about bringing this up again, but I just don't understand what policy statement 15 within the asset management policy implies. Given the complexities of ownership, it seems to prioritize things that have clear ownership. And there's lots of things that, I don't really understand the ownership issue and what things don't have clear ownership and so on. So I just, maybe means nothing in the long term. Maybe it's a big thing. I don't know.
Mr. Forrest, you want to have a go at that one? Is there any way we can clarify this ownership part?
Yeah, Yeah, I think it was just basically like for any like CVRD-owned assets would be under the scope of our asset management system and a way of doing business. I think if we were to look at assets that are owned by different organisations that we operate and maintain, then we will just do our operations and maintenance, but we won't actually do any capital renewals. That comes from a different source. That'll be from the asset owner. Yeah, I think it was just basically just to define what the assets that we own.
I see
not
Miss Miles
operate,
Wilson coming
rather
up
than
to give
anything
you a
else
bit of
around.
support there. Mr. Forrest?
Director Justice. Or, thank you.
Okay.
I think this is based on policy best practice. A lot of work went into kind of, going through this round of updates. But speaking to the fact that we still do have an infrastructure deficit, and by opening the gates up to things that are not under our ownership, the CVRD ownership, I don't even want to get into examples of how the scope could creep on that type of thing. But I think what you were getting at, Director Justice, is more around the natural assets. That was primarily the concern.
It was one of the things, I just looked at that policy statement, I went, what does this mean? What does this, what could result from this policy statement? And I thought, I wonder if natural assets, which are obviously have less clear definitions of ownership than, say, a fire truck or something like that. So that was an example that came to my mind in trying to, to figure out what that meant. But I still, and then I was starting to, sorry about this, but started to think, wow, ownership is complex at the CVRD, and there must be a lot of things that don't have clear definitions of ownership. For example, some sub-regional things, I suppose, parks and that sort of thing, which I guess we're getting into natural assets. But anyway, I just didn't really know what the implications of policy statement 15 were. That's all.
Yeah. I'm not
Yeah.
sure. There's Miss Mohan coming up there as well. This is
Go ahead, Barb.
this is getting into quite a complex discussion now. Can we, I think, for the time being, go ahead, Miss Mohan. You add what you have to, and then we'll take things from there. But I think we're getting pretty complicated at the moment, and questions which are very, very difficult almost to answer there. But
So I'll make an attempt. So the origin of this policy was through engineering. So it kind of relates to Director Abbott's question about why some things were not included at the outset. So when asset management started in this organization, it was done through engineering services or operations, right? So I think that if, from an operations and engineering services perspective, if you don't fully own an asset, right, the process of doing asset management has to be a collaborative exercise with the other owners, and it's difficult sometimes to move that forward because it requires more parties at the table to make the decisions and agree on the strategy for the asset going forward, whereas assets that are wholly owned by the CVRD, we can move those forward. And so because we can move them forward, and because it's a long process to get even just the ones that CVRD fully owns properly into the program, that would be the focus of the policy. And then the only other way I can think that this would come to light is if a joint asset required replacement, or a joint asset required a significant investment for a replacement of some part of it, then we would be forced to prioritize it and work with our joint partners or ownership partners on that asset. But if we're talking about like long-term asset replacement and funding for those things, that can get quite complex, and so we choose to focus on the things that we can move forward ourselves in this
yeah, I think,
organization.
Director Justice, if I may,
Thank
this
you,
is
Mr.
something.
Chair, I'm satisfied with
Okay,
that.
okay, good. Thank you very. Yeah, let's get the meat and potatoes in place first, and then we can look at the vegetables afterwards. Okay, this has gone on for a little bit longer. The next one we've got is. No.
We
Of course,
have
yeah,
a
sorry.
motion
Go on.
on the floor
Yep,
right now.
motion's on the floor.
And so the amendment has been moved and seconded that to add collaboration throughout the document. And I just need a motion to move the. Where?
Yeah. Yeah, and that, yeah.
Thank you. And so now it's on the main motion as amended. Thank you. We're all keeping track now.
On the main motion. as
So
amended.
that it be recommended to the board, approve the newly revised asset management policy and with the collaboration throughout as where approved. Where appropriate.
Where
Can't read my own
appropriate.
writing. What does that say? Okay.
Okay, so are we clear here? We are, and we've been moved and seconded. Okay. All those in favour? Any opposed? None opposed. That one passes as well. I was gonna suggest that. It went on for a bit longer, so let's come back at 10:30, please. And we are live. Take your seats, please. Director Acton. Director Acton. Thank you. Who's missing? Anyone missing? Yes, Director Eustache.
That's fine.
He'll be fine. Miss Boyd, what's next?
Thank you, Chair. We are R3, report from the General Manager, Land Use Services Department regarding regional growth strategy. There's a recommendation before you in 3 parts to consider.
Yes, please, read them out.
Number 1, that the staff report to the Committee of the Whole of October 9th, 2024 on the topic of regional growth strategy be referred to the City of Duncan, Municipality of North Cowichan, Town of Ladysmith, and the Town of Lake Cowichan, and that the municipalities be asked to A, appoint a representative to the Regional Growth Strategy Steering Committee, B, consider potential additional matters in the development of a regional growth strategy, including but not limited to, I, potential municipal incorporation and boundary changes to accommodate future growth and servicing objectives, 2, the future of Island Rail Corridor and its connectivity with the adjacent regional district, and 3, cooperation with the Regional District of Nanaimo on future growth of lands in the vicinity of the Nanaimo Airport and Cassidy Aquifer.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. And we have 3 parts to this, so we're going to take each one separately and vote on them as we move along. Okay, so Ms. Boyd has read that out. Do we have a mover? Seconder? Discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll be supporting the first point here, and just what I'd like to stress to the committee is what we're talking about here is a referral to the municipalities to get some input on the terms of reference, and that's going to come back to the board for approval.
Good, thank you very much. Director Martman.
Thank you, Chair. And as I read through this, I'm interested there's no referral sort of out to the Regional District of Nanaimo and potentially even the Capital Regional District. Because we talk about point 2 about the Island Rail Corridor, we talk about the Cassidy Aquifer, Nanaimo Airport. Is there a place and time that this should be at least shared with those other jurisdictions? I'm not asking for them to be appointments or anything like that, but about sharing information. And maybe that's already been done.
Ms. Gerald, if you can go ahead on that one, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to highlight that, so first of all, if the board chooses to initiate a regional growth strategy at that time, the resolution that's passed is actually very important because that resolution gets forwarded to the provincial government. And if there are additional matters that the board wants to consider, it's prudent to include those in that initiating resolution. And so the items that are identified here were identified through conversations with staff of both CBRD and the municipalities. I think that there is some logic to talking to the adjacent regional district if in fact the board decides that that is something that you're interested in. But I think there's probably time for that to get fleshed out. And of course, this is what's coming from staff, right? And so I think it's important to hear from the municipal councils about their interests. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Jaroff. Douglas, are you happy with that? Do you have any follow-up?
No follow-up.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list is Director Morrison.
I've got a couple of things to discuss with this, but the very first one being, on what basis does this rate going to this afternoon's board meeting? We don't normally, unless there's a urgency required, send stuff from the committee of the whole directly to the board meeting in the afternoon. So if there's a rationale for that, I'd like to hear it, and if there isn't, I'd like to ensure that this be forwarded to the next board meeting.
Ms. Jaroff is coming forward again.
Thank you, Chair. So the, the second part of the recommendation there deals with budget, and I think, I mean, I could defer to corporate services and the financial officer to respond to that, but I think that they would want to know for budget planning purposes sooner rather than later, if that is the intent of the committee and board.
Yeah, I take
Right,
your
for
point.
budget planning.
That this is quite a complex one, but to go too quickly on,
Not passing the sniff test here.
Sorry, say again?
I said it's not passing the sniff test to go to this afternoon. It should go to the next one.
Yeah.
Thank you. We would just amend this to go to, we would remove October 9th, 2024 and change it to the next board meeting.
I have my hand up. I'm not sure if anyone's noticed it.
Oh, Director Staples, let me put you on the list here. Hang on a second.
Thank you.
I would move that.
Do we have a seconder for that? Seconded, Director Martman. Discussion. Director Douglas.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess I'm confused as to why this would be delayed to the next meeting. This, to me, looks like a pretty innocent recommendation here from staff. All they're asking is for a referral to the member municipalities to provide response to the CVRD on appointing a representative to a steering committee, and also to consider additional matters that could be dealt with through the regional growth strategy. We're not committing to any, committing to the regional growth strategy through this recommendation. We're just simply sending this out to the municipalities to get their input. And I don't see the harm in that. And if, I know each of the member municipalities have their own priorities, so I think if we could get this referral out to them sooner rather than later, you're going to provide more time to provide meaningful input, and then allow this whole exercise to continue on the track and the schedule that the staff have outlined in that report.
I'm sorry? Yes. Okay, next speaker on this motion here, right? And I think it's been moved and seconded. Any more discussion, Director Justice, on the motion that's there now?
Yeah,
And my hand is still up.
Oh, yeah, I have her on the list here. Toward the amendment. Oh, toward the amendment, yeah, okay. Director Stables?
Yeah, thank you. I don't support this amendment. We have had plenty of thorough discussion about this. Our last meeting, we were very clear about the direction we wanted to move forward with. That is being presented with us today, and we need to take that next step. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Morrison's there. Director Acton, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just speak to the motion. I do have some other questions regarding this whole report, but yeah, I have no problem with bringing it to the board today. I think as Director Douglas and Staples have pointed out, it's been staff is trying to fulfill our direction. But also, I'd like to see this actually, so if we're referring it to municipalities, let's refer it to Electoral Area Director Services Committee as well, so that EA directors can give also their points of reference and have a representative on this committee. So do we need a motion for
I was
that?
going to ask the same question. Do we need a motion?
Let's deal with the motion on the floor right
Okay.
now regarding the timeline of the board meeting. Then we can come back.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Okay, that's Director Nicholson, you are next. You okay? Director Justice.
Yeah, I'm getting a bit confused about what we're speaking about, but I'll just simply say right now that I'm not in favor of delaying it.
Okay, if I'm understand it correct, hang on a second there. What we're talking about is trying to put this off until the next board meeting as opposed to this afternoon. On that, Director Morrison, you're next.
To the amendment, yes. I believe we have policy in response to our gallery, that we have developed policy that says that items passed at the committee of the whole go to the following board meeting, and unless there is a legitimate and urgent need for it to go to this board meeting. So waive the policy then, folks.
Thank you. To the board right now. The motion right now on the floor is to move either to the October 9th meeting or the meeting thereafter for the board. That is on the floor right now.
Okay. Let's call the question. All those, and is everybody clear on what we're voting on here? The amendment. To move it to the 24th, that's right. Okay, so call the question. All those in favour? Any opposed?
I'm opposed. It's Mayor Staples.
Thank you. The motion does fail. We go back to the main motion to refer this to October 9th. And I heard possibly another amendment.
Right, with the amendment to include an EA director as a representative, and to send it to Electoral Area Services Committee for points of reference.
But clarification?
I agree with the intent of Director Acton's motion there, especially to bring that to electoral area services, but with the steering committee, my understanding that was only staff representatives, yeah. Just refer it to the, yeah, to the committee.
Okay, so it's been moved, been seconded. Discussion? Director Justice?
It was actually a suggestion that I was also going to make, and so I'm in favor of it. But I would also say that it may be unnecessary because I think the process, as I understand it, is the municipal feedback, and like I guess we'll all be sitting around in our respective councils looking at what sorts of things we want to see in the RGS. But that will come back to the board, as I understand it, for our input and discussion. So you can do it in electoral area services, or you can just do it in the big board thing. But nevertheless, I don't think it's a problem, and I support it.
Thank you. Ms. Boyd?
Thank you. On the motion has been moved in second on the referral to add the referral to the EA committees.
Everybody clear? Any more discussion? No?
Yep.
Go ahead.
We're voting on the amendment only? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Okay then, so I'll call the question. All those in favour? Any opposed? None opposed?
Thank you. And then now the motion as amended.
The motion. Number one.
Number one.
Motion as amended. Any discussion? Go ahead, Director
I have a
McLeod.
question, and I've spent lots of time talking with colleagues about regional growth strategy, and I still don't understand, and maybe staff can help me understand why these items need to be associated with the regional growth strategy. Why can't these be handled, the future of the Island Rail Corridor? Why does this need to be, put with the regional growth strategy? Maybe staff could help me understand that.
Thank you.
Chair. Through you to Director McClinton. So these are simply items that were identified through discussion with other planners as items that wouldn't normally be included in a regional growth strategy, but in the context of this region may be important. So there's obviously a lot of work going on right now to look at the future of the Island Rail Corridor. That's being done through funding from the Ministry of Transportation. Doesn't really have a particular home in the organization, although our staff are handling that. And they do believe that there's going to be the need for additional work following, at the conclusion of this initial work that's being done, that it may take longer than maybe what was originally anticipated. And so that was flagged as a potential item. Again, it'll be up to the board to decide if the board initiates the RGS formally, if they want to include that as one of those items. It's just really just a potential item at this point for discussion.
Follow up?
Yeah. To Ms. Trough, I'm still like a little bit confused. Like we haven't passed the regional growth strategy and these items are being lumped in with the regional growth strategy. I'm not saying they're not worthy items and I'd like to see them go for referral, but why is it connected to the regional growth strategy?
Through you, Chair. So obviously the corridor could be viewed as a critical piece in respect of regional transportation or active transportation, right? So it's difficult to ignore it in the context of a regional growth strategy, and that's why it's suggested that it be included here. I haven't really talked a lot about how the regional growth strategy might, how that process might evolve, but my expectation is that if we go down this path, it's going to involve significant engagement with local First Nations who have a significant interest in that corridor and what happens in adjacent to that corridor. So that's why it's included.
Okay.
Final comment, if I may.
Yep.
Yeah, it just appears that we're putting forward a regional growth strategy, which it hasn't been adopted by this board.
Thank you, Director McClinton. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Chair, and I wasn't expected to have the three items severed, so I ask for a little bit of leeway here. You know, I'm really saddened that we're pushing to the extent that we are, and I realize the motion on the floor is simply the referral to the municipalities and to electoral area services. I've spent some time on Saturdays at the Island Corridor Foundation event at the train station, and just this past Saturday out in front of the CVRD at the market in regards to the comprehensive zoning bylaw. And it's interesting because I think at electoral area services, we are anxiously awaiting the completion of the HOCP, MOCP comprehensive zoning bylaw. And we know staff are working full out on that. And it just seems a little disingenuous for us to say, and we're going to embark on this process now. We'll send it to the municipalities and we'll get their feedback. But I heard on the street from members of the community that they're a little engaged out. We've been doing a lot of engagement. And here we are embarking on another planning process. And does the community want it? I know that there's folks around this table that want it. So I look at this rationally saying that we're just about 2 years into this term. We've got 2 years left. This is a massive engagement. This is a massive initiative. And does the community really want it? And the last thing I'll say is that, you know, Cowichan 2050 was a great product. And I see no mention in this. And we wanted to base anything that we did in the future on the Cowichan 2050. And it doesn't seem to be part of this process. We're embarking on a process that even the province has pretty stale parameters on. So I'll stop there and I'll have a comment on budget in a moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Giroff, I see you waving your hands at us.
Thank you, Chair. And it's not my intent to engage in sort of debate with directors, but I do want to point out that if you look at the draft terms of reference under 2.0, it does say the RGS will build on the collaborative principles and goals established in Couch in 2050. So that is recognized as foundational work. It's very aspirational. It really has no, the shortcoming is that there's no, it's not binding on anyone. And there's a critical missing piece, and that is looking at how this region is serviced in terms of water, sewer, transportation, drainage. None of that happens through 2050. So my expectation is that 2050 provides a great base, but that there's a lot more work that needs to be done on the technical end of things to look at how this region would be serviced and how it could grow sustainably. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Giroff. Director Segal.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure it's really clear that this motion is not embarking on the regional growth strategy. It's referring the terms of reference for feedback, and then it will come back and we will have the opportunity to really hash out if we want to do RGS or not. But that's not the decision that is on the floor right now. And I also just want to mention the terms of reference also specifically indicate to not replicate engagement that has been done through the MOCP and local area planning process to avoid that public consultation burnout.
Thank you for that clarity. I appreciate that. Next on the list is Director Justice.
Can we talk about number 2 or 3 yet?
No, we've separated them out here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say something very similar to Director Segal. Hopefully to ease the mind of Director McClinton a little bit, because I think those 3 items that are specifically mentioned are suggestions from CVRD staff. We're going to get a whole bunch of suggestions from the munis and maybe from the electoral area directors, and then the board will hash it out and decide whether or not those things should be included or shouldn't be included in the terms of reference, should we decide to go ahead with it. So it's, as I understand it, we're not having our input now, and there's going to be a lot of suggestions that we beat up and decide, and eventually we'll come up with the terms of reference that this board gets to decide on. And if I'm wrong about that process piece, I hope staff could correct me.
Thank you, Director Justice. And I'm getting a lot of help here, which is great. Thank you very much for this clarity for both of you. Director Nicholson, you're next on the list.
Thank you. So just for clarification, we will have an opportunity to discuss the terms of reference at a future board meeting. So I'm fine with that, but there's one aspect of the terms of reference that causes me a bit of concern because it would have financial implications. So we will be able to come back, will we, and talk about budget at a later date as well?
That's my understanding as well. Ms. Giroff, are you going to say something on that, or are you just...
I was going to say yes.
That's my understanding as well, yeah.
Okay, so that's fine.
Director Acton.
Okay, so I have to talk about number 2 and 3 because it's gonna.
Point of order. We've got
Well-
motion on the floor for number 1.
Well, it's gonna affect my vote then, right? Like severing all of these was a little problematic. So maybe we can call the vote then, or
Let's take it.
How's it gonna?
Let's call the question, right? Because then we can move on to number 2. And they are all interconnected, I agree, yeah. But at the same time, we thought it would be simpler to actually take them separately and then talk about each one in specificity. Yeah. All right, so let's take the vote. We've done the discussion that there is a motion on the floor. All those in favour? Any opposed? 2 opposed. Anyone online opposed? Don't see anything.
Number 2, that staff resources for a regional growth strategy project be funded by requisition through the Function 100 general government budget with equivalent reduction in Function 325 electoral area planning budget beginning with 2025.
Mover, seconder, Director Nicholson. Discussion. Yeah.
Okay, so money question. So, I guess if you're reducing the funding in the electoral areas portion, that means we are taking, work away from electoral areas, happening in electoral areas. So I'd like to understand, what is that percentage? So is it equivalent to 50% or 10, 5, what is it? And the other financial decision, yeah, I guess that's mostly it, is like how much for the whole picture, and how much is that budget?
Anybody from staff could take that one.
Chair, I believe Ms. Bowen is in the meeting and may be able to respond specifically to the budget questions. But my understanding, having looked at recently, was that the budget is roughly 2.5 million, and we would be looking at a couple $100,000. So it's a fairly small percentage, less than, I would say it's less than 10%.
So are you saying 5% of staff's workload?
I would say that it's difficult to answer that specifically. I could talk more about staffing in a closed session and allocation of staff resources and how that would work. But the intent is that it wouldn't impact electoral area services current work plans and expectations to complete both the MOCP and comprehensive zoning bylaw by the end of 2025.
Okay, follow up?
Yep.
Also, in this, when staff come back with this report, I think it would be really important to have what we foresee the whole budget, if it, like a complete budget for a regional growth strategy, instead of here's 50,000 just to get us started, and then a few months later we got another 200 from reserve, and like, just, so what's the big picture that we're investing in this process if it was to go to completion? Because that's what I find frustrating sometimes, is just that the bill just keeps ticking away, and would we have committed to it if we knew that was going to be the end dollar amount? So some kind of end goal or budget would be really helpful, which would happen. Most companies would, have a budget to perform a task, full task. So that, I would request that to be in the next report. Thank you.
You've got some backup. Miss Bowen's just come in.
It's always good when you have finances
But
back.
they're good points. But this is, yeah, I agree. We do need this nice big figure, which then it could be this. So go ahead, Ms. Sheriff.
Chair, respectfully, I do want to say that I tried to provide a reasonable estimate of what it would cost to conduct a regional growth strategy over a 3-year period, based on, work involved in other similar projects. But I will say that it's difficult to provide you with an exact figure today because, of course, we would have to go through the process of, convening that steering committee, finalizing what the terms of reference would be, what the work would be involved in creating an RGS, and then going out to market to see what consultants are going to come back with in terms of their contract amounts. So it's difficult to say at this point. I will say that there is money that has been earmarked, the $500,000 that has been earmarked, that could be relied on heavily over let's say the first 2 years of the project to avoid sort of getting into a difficult requisition situation in the early stages of the project.
Yeah, I know that forecasting is tough and not always exact, but some kind of more definite, this would cost this and this and this, I think is a business case that you bring forward, and this is how much it's going to cost. And then I think you'd have more, we would all be moving from the same page to move forward. So just some kind of more definite budget and per step, I think would be helpful for me.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. So, just to add, so once we know more about what needs to be done, including, the extent and scope of community engagement, that it'll be, I think we'll be able to provide a much more accurate figure.
Okay, are you happy now, Director Acton? No, it's a good point, actually. We need that number, if you could put that one in there. Next one on my list is Director Morrison.
I'm experiencing the same confusion in number 2, and I'm just wondering if, and this is where specificity is important, especially when it comes to budget. When I read this, in the second half after the general government budget, comma, would it be accurate if it were to read with equivalent requisition reduction in function 325? Because I'm hoping that's what it's referring to. Then it would be clear.
Ms. Bowen's coming up.
It says budget, not requisition.
Through the chair to Director Morrison, yes, we would be reducing requisition in 325 for the costs that will be coming out and going over to 100.
So might we amend the motion by adding the word requisition between equivalent and reduction? I would move that.
Is Director Markman.
Thank you, and I would like to know from staff about number 2, about the importance of this in timing. I'm thinking we're moving forward with a feasibility study based on 1, but yet this is talking about funding of a project, which we haven't got to that point yet. So is there a reason why this needs to be here versus referring this back to staff for when we finish the feasibility?
Ms. Yaroff, keeping you busy today, huh?
Chair, I'm not sure I understood the question. Are we still on 2?
Yeah, we're on 2, and I guess the timing of having 2 in front of us right now versus referring it back to staff and saying, bring this forward when we've had the feasibility discussion, because until we complete the feasibility discussion, why would we move forward with how we're going to break down the project, the regional growth strategy project funding?
You mean before the discussion has been sort of completed from number 1?
Yes.
Not the feasibility, the service feasibility study. So we're not talking about
No.
number 3. Okay.
No, we're talking about number 1, yeah.
Well, I mean, the reality is that, so staff have been doing work on this project, right, to date. And we don't have a vehicle for funding that work, and so it would be prudent to get that in place. Your budget's not adopted until your budget's adopted, so it would be, in my view, a sort of allocation of that budget in principle, so we can plan for it. Finance obviously needs time to plan for that as well. So, yeah, I mean, my preference would be to see, and it also impacts, how we organize and staff within our department. So there are some other pieces that go along with this, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe my sticking point for me is calling it the Regional Growth Strategy Project, because that indicates to me that we're moving forward with a regional growth strategy. And maybe that's the sticking point. And there's another way to reword that in a way that would say, this isn't about saying we've made a decision to fund regional growth strategy.
The potential.
Someone's suggesting the word for the potential. I'm not sure or should we refer this back to staff for a better wording?
Ms. Boyd, she's going to jump in here.
If I'm hearing correctly, amendment could be posed to that staff resources for a regional growth strategy planning instead of a project be funded, or if anyone else has wording that they would like to put forward as an amendment.
So we're changing project to planning. Would that be?
Yeah, I would move that if someone had a second.
Okay, and I have a second there. Discussion on that change.
Mr. Chair,
Ted Douglas.
could staff comment on that? Does that have any implications for what?
Good
they have
idea.
planned?
No? You happy with that? Yep. So this is the amendment. We're changing project to planning. Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? On the amendment, all those in favour? Any opposed? None opposed? That changes. So, this is, the amendment has been passed. Okay, could you read the amended?
Thank you. So the main motion as amended, the last two amendments, that the staff resources for regional growth strategy planning be funded by requisition through Function 100 budget with equivalent requisition reduction in the Function 325 electoral area planning budget beginning 2025.
That's the amended budget, the amended motion here, as amended. It has been moved and seconded? Any discussion? No? Okay.
Just comment, it certainly feels like we're voting on regional growth strategy right now. That may not be the intent, but that's certainly how it feels. And I just know, speaking for my area, anytime things have moved from areas specific to regional, it's been pretty heavy price to pay by my constituents in terms of taxes. Yeah, this certainly doesn't feel very good.
Any more? No more discussion? I'm going to call the question. All those, Director Justice, your...
Yeah, I just, on the question that was raised by Director Acton and Director Morrison on the overall cost of going through a regional growth strategy, if we do go through a regional growth strategy, were you looking for more specificity than is in the table on page 5 of the report, which does give anticipated expenses for the 3-year project? Were you looking for more specificity than that, or was that enough?
Through the chair. Director Morrison? No? Director Acton? No? No? Call the question. All those in favour? Any opposed? 2 opposed.
Thank you. Moving to 3, that the 2025 budget function for 100 general government include $50,000 to conduct a regional planning service feasibility study funded by requisition. And I believe Ms. Charoff is coming.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to comment that this is before you because of a prior resolution of the board to bring this back after further discussions about regional growth strategy. So there was, it should be considered separate from regional growth strategy. Regional planning is kind of a much broader term, and it could encompass a wide variety of things, including, active transportation planning, agriculture planning, and could also align with a number of other regional services that the regional district provides. The recommendation in the report indicates that this could be funded by requisition, and I've been informed that there is money currently within Function 100 that could support this work in 2025, so you would not need to use requisition. So if it is the will of the committee, that piece could be removed from the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shelf. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. So I was wondering if, is this a setup because we would have to go to referendum on this service? From a timing point of view?
Thank you, Chair. So it's not a setup.
Well, I mean, from a timing point of view, right?
Yes, from a timing point of view. So I sort of thought about whether or not this is something that could actually be done in 2026 as an option. That's certainly an option. And I did identify 2025 because you may be working through the initial stages of regional growth strategy, which are going to look at all of the different regional things that happen here. And so the alignment of that work may follow nicely with doing this feasibility study. And if the board were to decide to go to referendum, then the timing would probably work for the 2026 election. Of course, there's other ways of getting electoral assent that being an AAP. But yes, the timing would work with potential referendum.
Follow-up?
Yeah, so, I mean, I am very supportive of us considering a regional planning service, because I think it would be really helpful for the region. But I'm really concerned about the timing. I'm wondering if this is also going to detract from this regional growth strategy, potential regional growth strategy work by doing it now.
Chair?
Sorry, yeah, I was
Thanks
writing
so much,
down the
just
next
started.
speaker. Sorry, Ms. Yarrow,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
My expectation is that the work should be done by an independent third party, so it's completely unbiased, and obviously would require some internal project management time, but largely would be consultant-driven. And in that regard, it shouldn't detract from regional growth strategy work.
Thank you, Ms. Yarrow. Director Acton.
Thank you, Chair. I guess, I think trying to create a function is problematic at this point. Couldn't we just fund it through general government, get a plan, and then we have this plan and can go to the community during a referendum, during the, so get the work done before the election, then bring it forward as a referendum question. And then we know, maybe it's only, the function only needs 50 grand to or something something small, because the plan's already made. And, once you've had, we could have electoral areas agree to the plan, we can have municipalities agree to their plan, so then you just have this overarching plan, and it may not even need a function, just like our Cowichan 2050 never had a plan, had a function. So anyway, maybe it's just too much too soon, and it's almost like, for directors that are not even wanting us to move forward at this point, it's maybe dragging people along that don't want to be dragged along. So just, I think the funding part, could we not just wait on that?
Ms. Jarrell.
The function part.
Chair. So yes, absolutely, the board could, or the committee could decide to not move forward with this, could decide to delay it or defer it, or, as I noted, doesn't need to use requisition because there's the option to use existing grant funds. So I also want to highlight that regional growth strategy does not require you to establish a function per se. Even regional planning doesn't require you to establish a function per se. The intent here is just to look at the feasibility of establishing a function. Is it worthwhile or not? And perhaps answering some of those questions that you're asking right now.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Jarrell. Director Morrison.
So this is, I think my question is for finance, and just a note, so budget season is upon us, and so I'm clear in this. When it says funded by requisition, we're starting the march towards a number that we don't want. So I think I heard Ms. Chirolf say that there are grant funds that this could be funded through. So if I'm looking to staff for help on this, because I would amend this resolution by taking funded by requisition out if there's other sources that won't affect the overall tax increase to our residents. So I would move that if that was appropriate for staff.
Okay. I see that Ms. Jarrell was pushing you up to the podium. Go ahead, Ms. Bowen.
Through the chair to Director Morrison. So for that last one there, we can fund it within the function itself with funds that will not increase requisition for the 50,000.
Thank you. I'd move that amendment that the resolution stop with a period after the word study and that funded by requisition be deleted.
And seconded. So we have a new motion on the floor there. An amendment to the present one, which, would you like to read that one?
Thank you. So this is on the amendment to remove funded by requisition on the main motion.
Everybody clear? Okay, going to call the question? No? All right, discussion?
So, do you need 2025 budget in this?
Chair, yes, we do.
Okay.
We'll go into work planning.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, my mistake, didn't press the button. Let's do that again. All those in favour? Any opposed? None opposed.
Thank you. Now, on the main motion as amended, that the 2025 budget for Function 100, General Government, include 50,000 to conduct a regional planning service feasibility study.
Call the question. All those in favour? Any opposed? One opposed? Yes. Let's go for a 5-minute break. Come back, please, at 20. Buffering. Let's go and round them up from the other place. If you, Kate, can you? Yeah. Oh. Are we live? Not yet. Buffering.
We're live.
And we're live. Who are we missing here? Karen, Alison. We have quorum. Let's go ahead, Miss Boyd.
Thank you. We're on R4, report from the Economic Development Division regarding Cowichan Tech and Innovation Ecosystem Project funding options. We have Barry O'Riordan here to present.
Mr. O'Riordan, welcome. Go ahead.
Good morning, Chair and Directors. As you see here, the purpose of the report is to seek approval to apply for funding to support the implementation of the Cowichan Tech and Innovation Ecosystem Project. So the Rural Economic Development Diversification Infrastructure, REDIP, is a grant launched by the Ministry of Economic Development and Innovation, JEDI, with a final funding call that closes the end of October in 2024. Economic Development Cowichan is proposing to apply for $500,000 to that REDIP program to advance the implementation of the Cowichan Tech strategy and position Cowichan as a leader in technology and innovation sector by leveraging local talent, fostering partnerships, and implementing tech-driven solutions across industries. So the proposed draft project has 4 main elements: increasing access to capital through development of an angel network and innovation challenge, 2, the tech innovation ecosystem development, and then 3, technology adoption and innovation for existing businesses that would be outside of tech also. 10% of matching funding, so the program provides up to 80% matching funding, and 10% in-kind funding is permitted through the program that the CVRD could contribute. So additional 10% of matching funding would be sought then from the Island Coastal Economic Trust. This project aligns with the Cowichan Tech strategy, anticipated priority areas for the Economic Development Cowichan strategic plan, which is pending completion, as well as the CVRD strategic plan 23 to 26. And then in terms of the application, REDIP staff advised that the CVRD application should focus on electoral areas and municipalities under 25,000 as direct beneficiaries to the project. And regardless of these criteria, staff have confirmed that the intent is to make this a regional project supporting all Cowichan stakeholders. And we've been supported by the program staff to advance the project as proposed. And then in terms of other applications that are being submitted that we're aware of to the program from other municipalities. We're aware that some of the municipalities maybe are applying to the program also. However, we understand that the stream that we'll be applying for, other municipalities either not applying to or ineligible to apply to. And then if approved for us to move forward, we would seek a letter of support from other municipalities. So I'm here to answer any questions, and the rest of the information is in the report. Thank you.
Director Acton?
Yeah, I'd just like to declare a perceived conflict of interest, perhaps could be perceived as a director on ICE-T, and so is Director Douglas and Director Staples. But that is where we would, when it comes to ICE-T, is where we would recluse ourselves. So just wanted to declare that in case.
Thank you. There was a declaration of conflict of interest between your...
Perceived conflict of interest could be, but there is no conflict of interest, so.
Good, thank you.
We recuse ourselves at the ICE-T table, not at this board table, is my understanding of how all that works.
Thank you, Director Staples. We need a mover, and there is a recommendation here. Moved? Seconded? Seconded? Discussion? Any discussion on this one? I see none. I see no one online. Call the question. All those in favour? Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Well, there you go. That was quick, wasn't it?
Thank you so much.
Moving to question period.
Question period. Would you like to read the, is there anyone in the, I don't think there is. No?
Thank you. Not seeing anyone in the gallery to ask. Question period will move into closed. A motion that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with the Community Charter, Part 4, Division 3, Section 90, subsections as noted in accordance with each agenda item. CSM 1, closed minutes of September 25th. CSD 1, negotiations, Section 91K. And CSR 2, negotiations, as well as we add that one to land, Section 90 under the land.
That's all right. Take your time. Bear with us.
Sorry, it would be Section 91E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Boyd. It has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Any opposed?